Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast, where we make sense of local politics, schools, housing, public safety, the civic issues that impact the life of a San Diego resident. We break it down so you can understand it and make educated decisions.
Everything that goes into our investigative reporting, the journalists, public records requests, the data crunching, and this very show depends on the support of people like you because we're a nonprofit news organization. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. My name is Scott Lewis. I'm here with my friend Andrew Keatts.
What's up, buddy?
How are you?
Good.
Had an interesting experience this week. You know what a conceptual scoop is, right?
Hear about it a lot here in the offices of Voice of San Diego.
Conceptual scoop is basically the idea that a lot of people do a lot of reporting in town. A reporter does a lot of work, produces a story, and in that story is some bit of information that they haven't really recognized the power of. Yeah. The interest of.
Or it was in service of some bigger point that they were making that superseded it.
Right.
So it kind of got lost there.
So, yeah, some other reporter observes that and says, that's an interesting thing. I'm going to highlight it as having been done or surfaced.
Yeah.
And I'll make a story around that. And we call that a conceptual scoop. You have not scooped the information, but you have scooped the concept.
Well, yeah. Or just the importance
of it. It happened to us.
Yeah. This is your...
happened to me.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're not reading the Voice of San Diego Politics Report, you should be. Last week, we interviewed Josh Butner. He's one of the Democrats running for the California 50th Congressional District. This is the one that's occupied by Duncan Hunter. The Democrats have a dream of taking that seat, that this guy will be so beleaguered. If they can make it to the runoff, then they can throw him out. It's a very similar situation to some of these other places that have flipped.
Yeah. So as you documented in the piece, the Pennsylvania 18 race has opened people's eyes to the potential political possibilities that are out there this year, because a district that went for Donald Trump by 20 was won by a Democrat. This district, which is our reddest district in San Diego, went for Donald Trump by 15. So people are suddenly considering something that I think in virtually any other climate would never be considered. And in fact, in all of the political what-if scenarios I've ever contemplated in San Diego, CA 50 going blue is one that has never occurred to me.
Although there's a way you can actually picture it more likely than even California's 49th district right now in a different context.
Based on the scandal that has befallen
exactly
the young Duncan Hunter the younger.
The Duncan's Hunter. He's served. So Butner, this guy we interviewed, he's on the Hamul Dulsura school board, that prominent body. He served 23 years as a Navy SEAL, and he told us that is crucial to his qualifications for the job. He said in the interview I actually did, he said, quote, "It shows dedication that you've been exposed to foreign policy at the tip of the spear." By the way, all Navy people use the tip of the spear, or maybe all military, but I've been around the Navy a lot. That's what they say all the time.
Do they?
Okay.
I knew Marines said that a lot. That was like I've always understood it to mean actually something very specific.
I know
the first wave of fighting force.
Sure, but then like they'll use it for like specific ships that are the first to go in and stuff like that.
I see what you mean.
So I learned. So he says, continuing his quote, "I learned a lot about cultures in conflict and in cooperation. It should be a requirement to have served to even run." So in my opinion, after that he said, "In my opinion," I cut that part off. And my wife actually gave me trouble about that. She's like, that actually adds a different sense to it. I don't know. What do you think? In my opinion, it seems like a throwaway like clause to me.
If I was writing someone's copy and it wasn't within quotes, it was just we were talking and somebody wrote, "In my opinion, comma," like an op-ed, for instance.
Yeah,
that's getting cut every. I'll do a
the point?
control. Yeah, it's of course it's your opinion.
So Matt Strabone, the candidate for county assessor Democrat, he jumped on that on Twitter. Said that's not good. You shouldn't say that. Anybody should be able to run. And this is another thing. See, it didn't really stand out for me. I've been around Navy people so long. That's what they all say that. A lot of them say that.
Yeah,
you should have to do that.
It's interesting.
And so it just didn't even click to me as like that big a deal. I knew it was a bigger deal because I included it.
All right, you got conceptually scooped. Quit talking it backwards. All right, it's
no,
fine.
no, it's fine. So
Josh Stewart at the UT got you, and that's all right.
No, it's fine. Then Mark Campanajar, who's running for that seat, He jumped on it and said, this is bad.
Yeah.
And then Josh Stewart at the UT did the piece about it and conceptually. Now there's like 8 pieces so far about this thing.
Really? Where else?
Like the Navy thing,
Okay.
a few other things. So here's the thing.
Yeah.
We were able to see what Mr. Butner was thinking about this. We pulled up his new video. He explains, how he's just a little different.
I'm Josh Butner. And maybe it's because I spent my life in the Navy. I see things differently and do things differently.
So that's what's happened.
It will be interesting to see whether in a district that has elected Duncan Hunter Jr., who was a veteran and has been very supportive of the military, generally speaking, as a policy priority, specifically here in San Diego, whether this is actually a negative for him.
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's this whole thing.
I don't know, but
yeah, I think that this is actually the best possible thing that could have ever happened to him in this race. I think that I'm sure he's really upset, just really bummed out that there's so many media outlets telling his voters
this Navy SEAL
that he's a 23-year-old.
Thinks everyone should have to be in the military.
Navy. Yeah. So anyway, I'm not sure this is a winner. That video we pulled from, it's him. This is a little more awkward. It's him surfing. He's surfing, and then there's no beaches in the 50th California district. 50th district, but
Surf Alpine is a good sticker. Yeah.
Anyway, we also in the politics report a couple weeks before that, we interviewed Bill Wells, the mayor of El Cajon, a Republican running for that district. He's a fan of Trump. Much different candidate. So if he makes the runoff with Duncan Hunter, that's going to be a whole different dynamic, of course, than if Butner.
Yeah, I think
Mark.
To the extent that the blue pickup opportunity exists, it has to include a scandal-plagued Duncan Hunter Jr. advancing through June.
Yeah, exactly. All right. You might have noticed the bikes strewn around San Diego sidewalks. Our reporter Lisa Halverstadt had a question. Why don't they get encroachment tickets? Encroachment is the law passed to keep people from leaving trash on sidewalks, but the city started using it to clear the sidewalks of homeless residents. Last year, police recorded 2,742 encroachment arrests and citations, but police are not bothering the dockless bikes. What do you think? Should they? Maybe the homeless should rebrand as dockless humans. What's the word here I'm looking for? It's escaped my brain. Sharing.
That Silicon Valley says all the time. Disruptive. we're not homeless. We're a disruptive technology to the residential situation.
We're moving fast and breaking.
Yeah, we're moving fast and breaking things in the space of residential living. There was an odd social media response to this, which included like basically people saying, "Are you idiots? What don't you understand about the difference? Homeless people defecate outside.
Mm-hmm. Bikes don't.
And bikes don't." And I wish that
never seen a bike defecate.
I've also never seen a part of the San Diego Municipal Code that stipulates like, well, encroachment laws can be applied to homeless people's belongings on account of their gross.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not a legal principle to stand on.
Mm-hmm.
And the question posed by Lisa's piece was, what is the legally defensible distinction here between these two things? With a law, the encroachment law was put in place for dumpsters. It was passed to prohibit people like businesses that rolled dumpsters out onto sidewalks when they were disposing of them, and the city has creatively decided to interpret that rule to be something that they could use to get homeless people's belongings off the sidewalk.
Precisely because the illegal lodging ordinances and other things they had were deemed illegal.
Unconstitutional.
Right.
Unconstitutional. It is not illegal to be homeless.
Right.
And so the important question here is, can you continue to enforce it against this set of things and not this set of things? One interpretation is that you have to police the bikes as well. The other is that you might have to stop using this to enforce on homelessness.
Which would be a big deal in that's the main, if there's a carrot and stick approach to this homeless situation, that's clearly the stick. Like literally they're pushing people off the streets.
Now there's this segue, there is a carrot that has been in the news this week, which is they've actually provided for the first time, the city council this week approved the acquisition of a storage facility in the Logan Heights area, a new facility that would allow homeless people a place to go put their stuff.
Mm-hmm. And they'd have an office hour, they'd have times, they're promising neighbors they wouldn't be able to line up outside, they would enforce other codes around the area. But yeah, they're trying to make it so that people have places to store. The idea being, can you imagine trying to find a job if you had to carry everything you own with you?
Well, and I think there's a moral principle here that if we're going to step up enforcement and tell people that your belongings cannot be stored here on the sidewalk, that we owe some sort of alternative option. And that alternative option now exists in this storage facility.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is also a precursor to more enforcement efforts being done. That right now the city, if they see stuff laying on the sidewalk, they put a thing that says you have 72 hours to move that. I bet we start to see a lot more cleanup efforts go on, and maybe even some new laws that push that stuff faster.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, another issue related. The city of San Diego quickly purchased a building in East Village that was briefly an indoor skydiving venue. Why did they suddenly put up a bunch of skydiving venues?
That was a weird
indoor skydiving venue.
2011 had a strange indoor skydiving boom that we'll remember. It's like 1987 Jazzercise, 2011 indoor skydiving.
Okay, so this place, they're going to turn the building into a navigation center to match homeless residents with services. There won't be any beds or services, though. Experts caution that the building won't necessarily, this is our Lisa Alfstad did a piece on it, that the building won't necessarily address the many problems with coordinating homeless service providers. It won't make up for any lack of resources that are existent in this whole movement because it's a building.
Yeah.
It's just a building.
Yeah, I do think that, I understand the theory of this, and the theory of it is, look, you're a homeless person. You've got all the chaotic life issues that you would have by living on the street. It's a difficult place to be, and suddenly you have to navigate this bureaucratic maze of a nonprofit that provides counseling services over here, and a different nonprofit that provides job placement services over here, and a different nonprofit that provides housing placement services over here, and coordinating all of those is difficult. Mm-hmm. Understood completely. The solution that what is missing is a brick and mortar place that can help you move through that maze, a building that is going to be the thing that unlocks the ability to move through that maze. Is not that obvious to me. It
doesn't seem like we're talking about all these move fast break things thing. It doesn't seem
this is not the Silicon Valley solution.
This a building is what is needed, but they're moving fast on this one.
Yeah, and look, hey, be decisive, I guess. And Lisa, in her reporting, I think, was careful to say that no one says this is a panacea. And that's to their credit. They recognize that there needs to be some improvement in the system itself as well. And so recognized, stipulated, understood. It's just that the $7 million expenditure that has taken place is not systemic reform of the difficulty of navigating the system, but rather the acquisition of a building that is meant to be somehow an accelerator to this process.
That's what they should call it.
The accelerator?
Yeah. The dockless human accelerator. Sorry. I don't know if that
I can't decide if that was a great joke or a very offensive thing to say.
Okay. A century ago.
We're leaving it in. Okay. It stays, as far as I'm concerned. And all backlash directed at VOSD Scott Lewis.
A century ago, a handful of Native American tribes. This story fascinates me.
Yeah.
In North County, lost water as settlers began tapping the San Luis Rey River. For 50 years, the tribes fought in court to get it back, but Escondido and Vista, they still need that water.
Right.
So last year, looked like it finally seemed like it was being resolved Finally got there.
At the federal level.
Right.
It's like a serious 50-year legal fight.
Yeah, there's some of these cases against tribes and others in the state about water that are like 100 years old. Like they just keep going.
Well, and this one does, like the legal fight is 50 years, but the water was taken from them 100 years ago.
So 2 weeks ago, so that the whole thing finally gets resolved. Again, decades.
And the resolution, to be clear, is it's their water. It is their water.
So 2 weeks ago, the San Diego County Water Authority sent the tribes, though, a letter saying, hey, we got to go back to court. We want $2.2 million because of a contract dispute. Now, the thing that got me about this story is one of the quotes from the Water Authority guy, Mark Haddam. He's the county.
This was a good quote. You could. It's just dripping with the dismissiveness of a public agency attorney.
Yeah. So this is the Native American tribes were like, why are you doing that? We finally got this settled.
Yeah.
You know, this is a whole. There's settlers who took our water. This is another injustice over 100 years. And this guy says, this is a contract issue. The parties have a different interpretation of the contract, and trying to turn it into some sort of cosmic issue is silly. Cosmic. Yeah. I'm sorry that these people were subject to genocide and ethnic cleansing, and we took their water
100 years ago.
And that's finally being resolved, and you want $2 million because of a contract dispute, and they're the ones being petty.
And exactly. And they're the ones being petty, turning it into a contract dispute. The key issue here is the court finally resolved it and said, yes, it's your water in mid-May, which didn't work well with the San Diego County Water Authority's budget cycle. So they needed to be notified that the tribe wanted the water that was theirs on April 1st. And they're like, well, it happened 6 weeks too late. So $2.2 million, please.
So California regulators have sent 1,240 warning letters to unlicensed distributors of cannabis. So far, about 375 of those warning shots have been fired at San Diego operators. And so with that, Andy, we finally have a number on how many dispensaries and delivery services are operating in the black market in San Diego. So about
at least
375. Now, there were two reactions to this story. One was interesting, finally got a tally or whatever. And another one was like, see, I told you the black market wouldn't go away. Now, and my reaction to that is like, well, did you think it was just going to disappear in a day? Like it's been like 2 months.
January 1st, everyone who's been selling drugs for 30 years is just like, well, got to close up shop. Let's move on here.
These 12 places won.
Go email the Chamber of Commerce, figure out what to do with myself.
The thing that changed is that there's now a special revenue source and money and a tally and a whole effort to crack down on all those. Like that's this whole thing is going to be years. I mean, there's always going to be a cat and mouse game. It seems like in
people
this whole
still
thing.
Make illegal bathtub gin.
Yeah, like the cigarettes. I mean, there's always going to be that, but now there's a structure on what's legal and what's not. I'm not saying it's perfect. We might have picked too few winners in this. That Urban Leaf dispensary, by the way, seems like it's doing well.
Yes,
seems like it's a winner in this situation.
Yeah, that we've certainly you think Bitcoin created value out of thin air?
Right.
These like limited number of marijuana selling distribution licenses are golden.
Golden.
I'd like to measure their value in Bitcoin or in BTC.
They send that cannabis around picking people up.
That is
genius and just amazing.
Just absurd. I was walking in Gaslamp the other day, and they were just yelling to people like, "Come on, we'll take you to go buy pot." It's crazy.
Life is so different.
Yeah.
All right, our hero of the week.
This is one of the easier decisions we've ever had to make for this segment. Our friend of the podcast, Michael Turco, announced this week that he was retiring. He's leaving KUSI and he's moving on to the next phase of his life.
He's even moving.
Yeah.
What the heck?
I know. So it
ain't right.
So I'm at once very happy that he has ended a illustrious career in public service and is moving on to retirement. I'm happy for him. I'm sad for San Diego because honestly, Turco was playing a character. Turco was doing a bit, a very long-running and committed bit. But that guy covered a breadth of topics that were really important to people. He did it professionally, and he got done.
Yeah.
He made things happen, man.
Did you just bleep yourself? That
I
was fascinating.
did a thing. So no, seriously, I think San Diego will be a worse place without Turco, but I'm very happy for him. If you want to go plumb the archives of Voice of San Diego, we had him on and did a nice long interview with him, which was well received at the time, and I really enjoyed getting to know him. So give it a listen.
Our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
Our GOAT this week are the cities of Encinitas, Poway, really also Del Mar, Carlsbad, Escondido, Oceanside, Salina Beach, Santee, and Coronado. But those two, Encinitas and Poway, they only keep their emails their employees send, which we consider, and the state of California considers public records, for 30 days.
Yeah.
30 days. The state law says these entities, these agencies need to keep their emails so that people can request them and archive them for 2 years.
Yeah.
This story by Jonah Valdez blew my mind. I told him to look at it. He goes and looks. He does a survey of all the cities. It's horrible. And but in particular, Encinitas and Poway. Can you imagine only keeping your emails for 30 days? You probably have every email that you've ever had at this office.
100%. I've never deleted an email. No, so I got to say, 2 years is the minimum by state law. These cities are not complying with that. I know they have their interpretations, but it's say it with me now.
It ain't right!
It ain't right. It ain't right. All right, stay tuned. We have a big, interesting interview with the interim DA, District Attorney Summer Stephan, and it's great. Listen to it. This has been done in partnership with our friends at News Radio 600 Code.
The Voice of San Diego podcast is sponsored in part by Manilados Nelson Murphy, Advertising and Public Relations. As a nonprofit news organization, Voice of San Diego depends on our members, foundations, and sponsors like M&M. We are very grateful for all of our supporters and are happy to recognize them during our shows. M&M is run by Tony Manilados, Bob Nelson, and Kelly Murphy Lampkin, who bring a vast network and decades of advertising and public relations experience to businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, and campaigns. M&M bridges the gap between clients and the people whose influence matters most. M&M is a full-service agency that helps clients develop their strategy and launch cost-effective tactics. The firm specializes in public affairs PR and advertising with an emphasis on media relations, crisis communications, community outreach, coalition building, and broadcast, print, direct mail, and digital advertising. Learn more about M&M at mnmadpr.com. And if you like our work and are interested in becoming a sponsor, contact us at podcasts@voiceofsandiego.org.
Okay, we are joined once again in the great Voice of San Diego podcast studio by now District Attorney Summer Stephan. Welcome, Summer.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming in, taking the time. I appreciate it. So a couple of weeks ago, we had your opponent running, but before we get into the whole back and forth and the race and such, you have been District Attorney now, what, like 6 months?
A little more, about 8 months, since July 7.
How's it been?
So it's been great. I really love the job. It's something I've trained for 28 years, so it's really been just right up my alley. The main thing is seeing the team so excited and motivated and so energized, and all of the great work we're doing with the community. That's really a lot more about that than me.
Okay. So one thing I have heard is that you haven't made a lot of big changes, that you're sort of waiting for some kinds of maybe leadership or just putting your own mark on the office until you actually win, if you do win. Is that true?
Well, I've made changes. I like to be thoughtful about my changes. People that are fit the job and are doing the job, are still there. Other positions have changed because of either retirements or other reasons. But there's been changes. There's been also a change in terms of the priorities and the focus. Some in terms of stepping up, and some are more brand new.
What changes as far as priorities?
Well, one of the kind of new things added to the list, of course, I've worked on human trafficking for years and years, so stepping up those efforts was a natural, and watch pretty soon. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that are going to come to fruition, and for the first time, we are going to be a county where every school has an effective prevention program for human trafficking starting in grade school. And that's really been a labor of love. A law that we pushed for passed, which really helped me. Whenever something passes, it causes more energy. 1227, the governor signed it. In fact, I got to personally talk to the governor about it, which made me, thrilled to be a part of it. And it mandates that schools do prevention training, since this is the second largest criminal industry and kids at 15, 16 are the target. You have to start early, but it was an unfunded mandate. So we are bringing philanthropy and innovation and using technology. So it's cheaper with emails and programs being sent to teachers that will become the trainers. And that's rolling out across the county. And we're going to be showing that effort and energizing the community. It's something that parents and teachers have asked for, but I've been very happy to lead that effort. And then the other that's a little bit newer is really based on my time that I spent with the coroner. I know not a lot of people spend time with the coroner, but it is one of my favorite things to do. I know it's crazy. He's very funny. That's the good news.
You'd have to be, I would assume.
Yes, he is very funny. And there isn't a lot of noise there at the coroner's office. It's just he and I usually talking. And this...
I think that was a good joke, what you just said.
I don't know where that came from,
you mean
honestly. But
very dry, deadpan, very, very good. Okay.
I wasn't sure it was going to be a joke, but this past year we've surpassed any other way of somebody dying for age under 50. The opiate deaths have surpassed that at 400 deaths last year. So because of that, it's not because of the national craze in terms of opiate epidemic. It's really about San Diego because as DA, it's all local for me.
Sure.
And having 400 bodies in the morgue that are from overdoses related to either prescription pills or heroin or fentanyl is very dramatic. And so we are energizing a whole movement around that and a whole reprioritization.
Let me ask you about the issue of human trafficking. We talked a little bit about this the last time you were in, but I've been trying to understand it a little bit more as well. And my question has to do with, is there any form of prostitution or sex work that is not human trafficking involved?
There is a limited number, yes, of that. I wouldn't call it sex work because if you were out on these undercover operations and if you've talked to as many people, women that have left that life, you'd understand that it's pretty sickening. You really are, no matter what else you call it, whether it's a victim under the law or you're a victim because this isn't how human beings should live. Whichever way you want to look at it, you come up to the same place. But there is a limited number of people that can say that they are choosing this as a way to make a living and that they don't have a pimp or a trafficker that's deriving their money from that person. They're keeping the money and living, but that's a limited number. And the other challenge I have in accepting that, just from being on the ground doing this work for a long time, is is that even those people that tell you they're choosing this life, they were recruited at an early age. And so at some point they were able to be independent, but that didn't happen at an early age. So they were trafficked at an early age. So in my head, how do you really become free if this is all you know and you don't have a degree, education, or any other line of work to sustain yourself? So I'd say it's very limited.
So that's what I've been trying to understand is are we seeing a vast increase in human trafficking, or is that also, or is any increase also paired with just an understanding that there is no way to be involved in that life without there being a trafficking or almost slave relationship or a servant relationship? Is that what you're saying?
So I would say, that hasn't been specifically measured, but my experience tells me that part of it is that we are actually seeing it as opposed to missing it, where it's hiding in plain view, but we don't know what it is. Officers weren't trained before, and they really only looked at victims as perpetrators. And so that being part of that retraining and creating a post video and doing constant training, I did the very first training for our human trafficking task force on to kind of catch what they need to catch, to see it for what it is. So training is a big part of it. But I think the social media and the ability to be able to buy and sell a human being online has expanded this, because men who would normally not buy sex feel a little bit of protection by not having to be out on the street picking up somebody on El Cajon Boulevard. They feel the anonymity of just going online and ordering a person like you're ordering pizza. Yesterday, a huge win for us. A bill passed that for the first time will change the Communications and Privacy Act that has protected Backpage and all those websites by letting them hide behind the First Amendment when they're actually selling kids online.
So you'd actually hold the platforms themselves responsible.
Exactly. And so that passed yesterday, and we're hoping that it'll be signed into law. We've been a big part of that effort.
Senate and
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk about this a little later, but I'm going to jump to it quickly. Is the new district attorney in Philadelphia, Larry Krasner, he made a memo he put out recently, and one of the parts of that was interesting is, he's being hailed by criminal justice reformers as making a lot of reforms quickly there. But one of the points he made and it was a memo to his prosecutors. He said, "Do not charge prostitution cases against sex workers where a person has been arrested 2, 1, or no times." Basically saying, like, don't ever go after the women or the people participating. Is that?
He also said if you've been charged more than 3 times, to divert them to a specific human trafficking court.
Yeah. Do you think that there's ever a time to prosecute mostly the women involved in this situation?
Very rarely, and that has been my policy.
Mm-hmm.
And so with kids, we don't charge. Sure. With adults, the first question, and all of the officers have been trained, is to ascertain if this person is a victim, if they've got a trafficker or a pimp, and that's why they're doing it. And so their goal is to identify victims. And actually, under our law, which we helped push for, there's an evidence code exception, which means we cannot charge. California law is much more advanced, and I'm fortunate to have been at the forefront of those changes. We can't charge a victim. It doesn't matter if they're engaged in prostitution. If they are a victim, they can't be charged. They're accepted from that section. So now you're left under the law with that category of folks that tell you that they're independent and they don't have a pimp or a trafficker. But even in those cases, my policy is to divert them. The only reason that we involve the criminal justice system is because we want to be able to help them escape that life and they can't do it alone. They still need resources, so they go through a program that helps them connect with services, connect with housing, and then they end up without a criminal record. A big win and a bill that I wrote and testified on was to separate our prostitution statute, and that only passed this year. And the separation creates two categories instead of what used to be lumped in one: the person who is being sold and the buyer. And with that, it allows us to apply different consequences to those categories. So that's been a huge thing, because obviously we want to make sure that we are giving equal justice. And with the buyers and the sellers being under the same category, that was more difficult.
Okay, good.
So since we're talking about this Krasner memo, I'll ask another one. So he also issued this directive to his prosecutors. He said with plea agreements, with plea offers, he said prosecutors should make plea offers for below the minimum range of sentencing guidelines. He also said that if an ADA thinks that something below that minimum range is too low for the severity of the crime, they need to get sign off from a supervisor to go above it, and that anytime that going below the sentencing guidelines means that you would be looking for a sentence of 2 years in incarceration or less, that you should really look for things like probation and house arrest as an alternative to those 1 or 2 year sentences. I'm just curious, what do you think about that as a policy proposal?
Okay, so that, as you say it right there without anything else, that tells me that there's not anywhere in there that indicates a victim voice or a concern for public safety in general. What we do in San Diego County, we are one of the biggest reform areas anywhere. We actually measure recidivism. We had the first re-entry where when prisoners come out of prison, instead of just being given a few bucks and on their way, we have a re-entry roundtable and what we call a lighthouse, a transition house, where they get to go and get referred to services and work and other things so that they don't recidivate. We have a behavioral health court to address mental health instead of in lieu of jail. We have drug court, which is one of the original drug courts anywhere in the country, which also gives them diversion instead of jail. So actually beyond what that memo says in terms of giving people second and third chances. We have diversion for all sorts of categories of crime, probation for all sorts of categories of crime, even sale of drugs or other things with Proposition 47 are eligible for actually more benefits to the perpetrator than what is offered in that memo. But with everything we do, my DAs have the ability to balance public safety and to balance the victim's views. So we take Marsy's Law rights, which are the victim's rights, just as seriously as we take the offender's rights. And that's a humane way to be in society. For me to issue a memo telling my DAs, do this, but don't call the victim who's been burglarized and tell her and get her view of whether she's terrified or what her input is, I don't think that's fulfilling our constitutional duty. In San Diego, in California, we have both the defendant's rights under the Constitution. We also have victims' rights under the Constitution. So it's not that I have, with what you told me, I have an issue with, I think we're doing so much of that already. I just have an issue if this is all the memo said, that it doesn't require the prosecutors to check with victims.
And so in the 8 months you've been in the position, what has been your general approach to plea offers? Have you materially changed that direction from your predecessor?
Well, one big area is the marijuana area. The law provides, both the law and the spirit of the law provides for all sorts of relief. So we've been able to be the first county to actually give 700 defendants. That's a huge amount of defendants previously convicted of felonies or misdemeanors that would be eligible for relief, either to a reduction to a misdemeanor so that they can get jobs, so they're not felons, so they reintegrate with society, and misdemeanors that can get basically a dismissal. We've been able to process about 700, and we've sent the next, because instead of saying, well, let them apply and they'll figure out the law, we looked at what the law says and the spirit of the law, which was to give a large category of people relief so that they can reintegrate in society at the lower level. And so instead of waiting for that to happen, I knew ethically that I have a sophisticated case management system that allows me to pull information as to who is still incarcerated. And that's what I focused on first. Who's incarcerated under this law, who would not be? And then going down, who's on probation, who would not be, so on and so forth. So with that, we then sent that list to the public defender to make it easier to say, here's the people who are eligible. We created a one-page form that's really easy to fill out, and basically work together to get mostly agreements on the reductions so that the court could quickly process this effort. So that's one thing. Yeah. The other big change in pleas that I've made is the allowing of diversion for most misdemeanor categories of crime. So ones that were not previously eligible for diversion, like petty theft. And petty theft is, a moral turpitude crime. And when people are applying for jobs and other things, don't get me wrong, I don't want anybody to steal. But if there is a way to actually have this person rehabilitate and go on a better path instead of having this theft conviction that's going to make employers not hire them. And this came a lot from me being out in the community, which I'm out in the community almost every day. And having especially immigrants tell me that they didn't realize that this kind of conviction, a misdemeanor petty theft conviction, was going to be really, really devastating for them.
So let's stick on the marijuana thing for a minute. You brought that up. One of the reasons I first invited you back on the show was after the news of the James Sladek settlement. So James Sladek had been accused of several felonies for his cannabis operation that was going on in Kearney Mesa. And it wasn't necessarily cannabis. It was some of the production facilities and stuff that he had. And whether they had actually lied to police and things that came out. The settlement moved all that down to a misdemeanor. And then this quote from your spokeswoman, Tanya Sierra, caught my eye. It said, presumably speaking for you, she said, this settlement takes into account the changing focus of the district attorney's administration, which allows companies to apply for state license to legally sell marijuana. But the changing focus of the district attorney's administration about marijuana implies to me that you were changing the focus from your predecessor about that drug. In what ways?
So I don't think of anything as changing the focus from the past. I just have my ideas. I'm the DA and I want to implement them. So I really believe in prosecutors following the law, but not putting up roadblocks to the law because they don't like it or they like it. So it's kind of irrelevant. We follow the spirit and the letter of the law. So when the law changed, even though this case was older and fell under previous law, my question to my team is, does that meet the spirit of the law? Yes, technically the person falls under previous law, but the spirit of what the electorate has told us and what the community has told us is different. So we can't put up these hyper-technical barriers, but should we not be following the law and the spirit of the law? So that's what I meant with that. And that's what I'm applying, and that's why we were proactive in how we gave relief rather than wait for it and see if somebody misses that there's a new law in this regard. And the same with Mr. Sladek is being fair to him and applying what the law is now since the case was still pending.
his attorney, Jessica McElfresh, is still going through the process with your prosecutors. The big issue that sort of spooked a lot of attorneys was that your office was seeking all of her communications beyond even with her client, but just this idea of attorney-client privileges being sort of penetrated really spooked a lot of people. What is your perspective on that case?
So without specifically talking about a pending case, I'll still answer your question. There are a lot of protections for attorneys, and they should be so, because the attorney-client privilege is very important. We can't serve a warrant on an attorney and just get the stuff and take a look at it. There has to be totally different than other categories of people. There's a special master that then takes it to the court reviews it, so we don't get to lay eyes on something that we shouldn't lay eyes on. And I completely, wholeheartedly support that. So that's what happened in this or any case. Again, with her or with anybody who's charged, I am going to be applying the spirit and the letter of the law. I want to be fair to everybody based on what the law is. And I want to make sure that my team follows the rules and goes overboard in terms of making sure that the attorney-client privilege is protected. We are working and providing information to her attorney. We're doing everything in an open-handed manner, and certainly I hope that whatever happens with this case at the end, that the community will end up feeling that we were just like we were with Mr. Sladek.
Have you seen her communications then? Is that what you're saying?
There is evidence that allowed the charge, and when the preliminary hearing happens, whatever that evidence is will come out.
Okay.
The county of San Diego has not allowed the licensing of marijuana selling establishments in the unincorporated parts of the county. It's led to a situation that our reporter Kinsey Moreland documented, where in certain areas in the unincorporated county, illegal dispensaries have been opening up, then getting shut down, opening up, getting shut down. How much of a stress is that on the county law enforcement, prosecutors who have to make decisions about bringing those cases? And in general, is the county's decision not to allow for recreational marijuana establishments to open, is that consistent with, as you say, the spirit and intent of a law that legalized marijuana?
You know, the law gave that option to counties and to cities. So the city gave multiple licenses, the county did not. So that's what the law is, and that's really a city attorney and county and electeds, their prerogative. My lane is really big. You know, I have to take care of public safety for 3.3 million people. All murders, rapes, burglaries, elder abuse come to me. I have priorities, and I have a lane that involves the very basic dignity and protection of people in my community. All misdemeanors come to the DA's office, GUIs, domestic violence, everything else. The only crime we don't handle that is not my lane as district attorney and my 1,068 amazing team is if it's a misdemeanor in the city of San Diego. So I try to really use my energy and focus the right way. I look at crime statistics. I look at the fact that we are at a 49-year low in crime. What have we done right? What can we enhance in that lane, in that area? Am I going to take resources away from dealing with a murder or domestic violence or a child abuse to deal with a dispensary? No, I'm not going to do that. But I am going to follow the law. And the law says it should be a legal dispensary. And if within looking at all of my resources, I can execute the law in all areas, I will do that. But I always want to keep my eye on the ball as to What are my priorities? Human trafficking, elder abuse, the only crime statistic that's up, the opioid epidemic, killing 400 people. I want to look at reforming and continuing to put my effort into juvenile reform that's already reduced incarceration in the prison pipeline by 49%.
Yeah.
I don't want to take my eye off of those things.
In terms of
But I don't want to fight with the county as to what their lane is. It's not my lane.
Yeah, but in terms of that discretionary decision, where the law allows them the prerogative to decide to allow dispensaries or to not. What's better for public safety?
I'm going to let those supervisors decide for their areas. And I think there are different populations. Our communities are really different. And that's what makes us so special in San Diego. San Diego City is different than El Cajon and different than Oceanside. So that's why I think the decision is best for those folks as they represent their own communities.
Let me ask you about that. They said 49-year low as violent crime goes. That we've talked about on the show contradicts some of the rhetoric from the president's office about some of the cities like San Diego or California in general, and all the carnage that we're seeing, and the unauthorized immigrants in particular, and what they might be reaping and doing in cities. And there was something that came up. One of your district attorney deputies, Paul Greenwood, tweeted recently that your opponent had issued, quote, scary rhetoric by saying that she wanted the sheriffs to ban immigration agents from the courtrooms. And he said, are we not proud of the USA having courts that are accessible to all? Isn't that part of our democratic principles? Do you think immigration agents should be able to operate freely in courts?
Justice Cantil Sakayui, that's our Supreme Court justice, she issued a memo in which she indicated that although she doesn't have the authority, that she believes that it will put a dampening effect on victims and witnesses wanting to come to court. My priority as district attorney is to make sure that victims and witnesses are comfortable, that the laws apply to them. And I think her position that it can dampen that is reasonable to me. We are supporting a law that I think is going to help us in this area. We're supporting it in Sacramento, and it's a bill that would make discussion or even bringing out in public in a courtroom a person's immigration status not proper, and that those discussions can only happen when the courtroom is cleared and it's what's called the 402 hearing with a judge, for the judge to determine whether the fact that this person's immigration status is one way or another may be relevant or not relevant to the case. I believe in that wholeheartedly. My courts are state courts, and there's nowhere that it says that the law doesn't protect victims and witnesses or doesn't hold even defendants that are immigrants or not immigrants in a different way, and I support that.
But so does that mean you disagree with Mr. Greenwood that banning them or keeping ICE out of courtrooms is scary?
You're reading me his tweet. This is a tweet. I knowing Mr. Greenwood and how he is and his big heart, I think there's something in what he wrote that is missing in translation. I really can't imagine this is what he meant.
It does seem like you're broadly sympathetic to the rationale of so-called sanctuary policies, which I've always understood to be of two parts. One is that it is not the responsibility of local law enforcement to conduct federal immigration enforcement, and the other part being the things that are responsibility of local law enforcement, health and criminal and public safety, are ill-served by going down the road of participating in immigration enforcement. So it sounds to me like you sort of support you are of like mind of that idea. But it does put you in opposition to the views of the President of the United States and many Republicans who think that local law enforcement should be happy to work together with ICE or Customs and Border Patrol to engage in immigration enforcement. Is that a fair characterization, that you are at odds with those sensibilities towards things like SB 54?
I don't know exactly, because I like to look at situations specific, because the devil lies in the details. So as far as immigration, I don't think we've ever assisted immigration. I think they're their own agency and they should do their job the way their structure tells them to do it. I would never want to tell them what to do or what not to do. I may think it in my head, but it's not appropriate for me as a state district attorney, just like I don't want them to tell me what to do with my victims and witnesses and how we handle them. So again, it's very important that people stay in, they do the most good if people do their jobs in the lane that they're in and they do it fully. And that's what I'm doing. Now, we work together in task forces that are very important, joint terrorism task forces. You saw the U.S. Attorney and I take on huge cartels, take the money profits, stop 20 pounds of fentanyl that will essentially kill, thousands of people. 2 salt baths will kill you from coming into our country. We work together on those issues. We work together at a binational conference on human trafficking because we want to make sure our victims don't end up in Mexico and that Mexico doesn't send victims here that are going to be victimized and not protected. So I don't see that this 54, my reading of it, that it prevents me from continuing the positive work that can only happen if grown-ups talk to each other and get the job done. When it comes to cartels, comes to human trafficking, we are a border, the transnational border, the transnational drug and traffickers and human traffickers. I want to continue to go after that. I am not going to get engaged in things that are legal under California law, but illegal under federal law. Example is marijuana. We have totally different laws. So I will not be violating state law to assist a U.S. attorney in enforcing his part of it. But on many things, we have common ground. Human trafficking is illegal on federal and state. Drug cartels are illegal on both sides.
So I guess it's fair to say, from hearing you, that you don't think people are right if they said that something like SB 54 adversely impacts public safety in California.
So I don't think we've tested it long enough. And the reason I say this is you can picture a case where a person is released from jail and, for example, there's some hiccup in the paperwork and that person is dangerous to our community and there is an inability to communicate that this person who's maybe on their 4th DUI and, may injure somebody, that they have departed the jail, that you can't make that phone call. That's still in progress. I don't know. I don't think we are there in terms of an evidence-based way to see if we see any harm. I don't have any ready examples of harm that's been caused because I see that my teams have been able to continue our public safety work, to continue to prioritize, and really largely it's business as usual for us.
If you had a victim who was an unauthorized immigrant, victim of, say, human trafficking, could you tell her that she would be protected from immigration enforcement or that your deputies or the people you work with wouldn't cooperate with immigration enforcement?
Absolutely. I would tell her she's protected. I would give her the resources like Casa Cornelia to begin her T visa work, which legally protects her and gives her continued presence. Refer her to resources so she has shelter and housing. In fact, We served over 12,000 victims last year through our victim services, which is paid for by state compensation fund, and we changed our policies years ago. I was in charge of victim services for a long time, where we've really encouraged state compensation to never ask questions about immigration and providing support, relocation services, housing, shelter, food, protecting them from the threats. We've done that all along. I couldn't tell you which ones of our 12,000 victims were immigrants with no documentations or with documentation.
I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the things your opponent said. Genevieve Jones Wright, when she was in here, she made a couple of points. And on that victims question, one of the things she said is that she recognized the points about the victims that you've been making about listening to them. She said she wishes that the victims of officer-involved shootings were treated similarly, that they had the same sort of attention and that their concerns were represented similarly. What would your response to that?
Well, with officer-involved shootings, there's a legal definition of victim, obviously, and under the law, we follow those legal definitions. And under Marcy's rights, you'd have to find that somebody is a victim of a crime. That means a homicide or an assault
crime. Okay.
Was committed against them. But we do everything possible to, and I can tell you that I've had those meetings with people where if they've lost a loved one, they've lost a loved one, and it's not going to matter to them whether I find that the shooting was justified in terms of not being a crime, a homicide. They still lost a loved one, and we do our best, although they don't have the same rights under Marcy's laws that are provided. We still try our best to make sure they don't have surprises, that we let them know about that the decision is coming. So if they want to turn off the TV and not watch the video from the shooting, the BWC, they can do that. We do our best to be humane because that really matters. But it is very difficult, and I want to continue to strive to have that communication while balancing, the privacies and all of the things that we do.
Wanted to ask you about this point that came up, and again, thank you for coming in and taking all these questions. There was this issue that came up with Chris Keatts. So Chris Keatts was accused of illegally disclosing a confidential city attorney memo that he had gotten. He's a city council member. City attorney puts out a memo. He gives it to some of the people that were discussed in the memo about legal strategy and such. She says that was an act of crime, something even worse than that. She obviously has some conflicts. She refers the case to you. And you said the district attorney is the people's prosecutor focused on pursuing justice and fairness in an equal manner for all, with no regard to politics or political parties. To ensure public trust in the impartiality and review of this case, we've referred the matter to the AG's office. Why did you do that?
Well, the law provides that where there may be a conflict or an appearance of conflict, that whatever decision you make, whether for or against, would be viewed from a lens of politics or from having a bias, that the Attorney General is the right place for it to go. As you know, the Attorney General is a Democrat. Again, he has a nonpartisan office, just like the District Attorney's office. So again, to have the Attorney General look at it in a more objective way. I feel objective about everything because my brain is trained that way, but it's about public trust and public perception in a case like this. It happens that my campaign treasurer is a signator on the soccer city or is one of the people involved. And I didn't want to leave any impression that a decision one way or another would be favoring one side or another.
Okay, so the reason then, the specific concern for the potential appearance of conflict by by outside people. Was that April Bowling as a signatory on the Soccer City initiative also as your campaign treasurer?
It's one. I mean, I look at it as, are people going to have confidence in this decision? Are they going to have trust? Are they going to think about it? And that's one of the things that I considered, in addition to talking with the Attorney General's office. And I think we both reached the conclusion that that was the right decision.
So April represents a number of clients. Chris Keatts has a number of affiliations. Mara Elliott has a number of affiliations. I guess what worried us when we saw that is the implication that you didn't think you could maybe evaluate any case related to people affiliated with any of those folks.
Yeah, absolutely not. I can evaluate a case, and you know, in my heart, I feel that we would have done an objective job. But would the perception have been that because of all these different connections, sharing a consultant, also the fact that, you know, I have endorsements from Mara Elliott, whether it's because of the treasurer being a directly involved in this Soccer City, all of those factors together, it's not like one thing. It was clear to me that this was the right decision so that the public can feel complete confidence.
So, I mean, so April is also the chair of the airport authority. She is she's a treasurer for, I would venture to say, most Republican candidates on the city council. She's just a very active person. She was a signatory on the pension reform initiative, Prop B, which is now in front of the Supreme Court. Should we expect as a precedent that any time April Bowling is involved in a case, that this might be the type of thing that would trigger a recusal?
It's a combination of all the factors, and she was more than just being on. I think she was the voice on TV talking about Soccer City. So it's the degree. It's looking at everything in context, and of course, thank goodness I'll be done with this on June 5th. So this isn't something that's gonna go on and on. You know, in terms of being in a campaign, can't wait for it to be over, and where I don't have to consider any of this outside stuff.
But if somebody wanted to endorse you so that you would never prosecute them, that's not a deal that you're going to make.
Absolutely not.
But you can see
fact,
how we
they'll
would
piss me off more. But
well, but you know, so this campaign would end, but you'd still have to run for re-election, presumably in 4 years. April will still have been your past campaign treasurer. I think it seems that there's a certain amount of inseparability around the political world in town, which is just that there's only so many people who are very involved in local politics, and it's relatively inevitable that there's going to be some 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon that happen if one is motivated to look closely enough. And so what can we take away as the precedent for when something will rise to the level when you must recuse? Because yours, whether we like it or not, it is a political office. So there's no getting around that. Well,
first of all, it's not my call. So the Attorney General has to feel that there is a conflict and that they're going to take the case. So it's not up to me. I could, decide 100 cases, which I would not, because I love work and I love making sure that our team does the work that the county wants us to do. But in this particular case, this issue came up, and we did what you should do ethically, which is to have a discussion, to present all of the information to the Attorney General, and they determined that they should take the case. I can't ever force the Attorney General to take a case, and that's how the system works. So it was their determination that based on the totality of everything, there is this potential conflict. I think it's unique to the situation, to the time, and to the role and the full participation of the parties, like I talked about.
In the future, would you consider your written statement, when you explain your decision to recuse, would you consider enumerating the reasons that led to that recusal?
I don't think so, because I'll consider it case by case. But as you could see, you had a lot more questions about it, which is reasonable. And I think that you can't. It's a degree, and it's the fact that the Attorney General decides whether that meets the standard. I don't get to decide that. So, but I felt that to be completely fair and make sure that the public has confidence, I had to at least raise this issue with the Attorney General. Be transparent, tell them all of the details of all of the facts, and have them make the decision. And that was the decision that was made.
So the Real Justice PAC, which is a national group that supports criminal justice candidates for DA races, has announced that it's going to look into the San Diego race. And so there's a UT story caught my attention. On a UT story that was announcing this caught my attention because your campaign manager, Jason Rowe, said this. He said, as Chief Deputy DA, Summer oversaw the juvenile division and helped reduce juvenile incarceration by 48% and helped pioneer innovative alternatives to incarceration for veterans, the homeless, and nonviolent offenders. So he had previously sent a memo around to people within your campaign and within the potential support network that warned that there was going to be outside investment in this race from criminal justice organizations. And I kind of, when I saw that headline and as I was reading the story, I was anticipating him to say, see, I told you that people from outside San Diego were going to start meddling in this race. But he didn't say that. He said he made a case that you would be a suitable candidate for support from this group. So let me ask you, would you accept and welcome the support of the Real Justice PAC or a similar group?
So that's a big question. So I welcome discussion and support from as many walks of life as there is. I mean, who doesn't want support? But here's the bottom line, and I don't think that the Real Justice PAC or anyone else who might be wanting to get involved in this case in San Diego really knows San Diego. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're in San Francisco, they're in New York, they're wherever they are. I don't think they really know San Diego and San Diegans and everything that we've done to build a reform, innovative, safe city and county. We are the top 3 safest urban counties in the United States. We have great police community relationships. Can they be improved? Absolutely. Let's keep working on that. We started Veterans Court. We have diversion for low-level offenders. We have lowered the juvenile pipeline incarceration rate by almost 50%. We've closed down a jail. The sheriff has a 30% recidivism from people let out of his jail compared to 70% elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So, and I've visited, we have apprenticeships and retraining, RISE court, behavioral health court that's getting expanded. We have all of the things that they talk about that people should have.
So do you consider yourself like-minded to them?
So not exactly. And the reason for that is their conversation does not include victims. And I think that prosecutors must value and give dignity to victims as we do for all parts of our systems. The platforms that they have in terms of the prosecutors that they want to select, they don't include a conversation about victims and victim care and making sure that communities are safe, truly safe, that they're doing the right things by attacking organized crime, by going to work together to make sure that kids can walk to school, that threats are being handled the way we handle them in San Diego, where since 2014, we created something where every threat gets reported to the DA's office, and we accepted the additional work and burden to make sure each one is addressed to its final conclusion that keeps San Diego safe. So there's things in what they say that makes sense, but we are light years ahead of what they're saying. What they're saying is it seems to me like they're talking about Philadelphia, where they had problems there. They're talking about Chicago, where they have a distrust and a break in the communities. That's not San Diego. It's like they are looking to offer solutions for a problem that doesn't exist. We have things we need to work on, but I think we're working on them already. In 7 or 8 months, there are many of the things that the community has suggested that we've rolled out, that we have in place. So I don't believe in that democracy should involve one Facebook billionaire or any other billionaire funding a PAC. You know, I've as you know, I hate raising money, but I've raised money person to person, you know, over 1,000 San Diegans contributing money at 800 max, from 5 to 50. That's the right way to do it, I think. I think it should be an election of a local DA by our local communities.
So I want to ask you, you and I had an exchange that I want to try to vet out a little bit. It was about, I noticed you had participated in the Women's March on January 20th. And I've noted that you were a Republican participating in that, and I thought that was interesting. And you had a reaction to that label that I thought was interesting. Do you consider yourself a Republican?
You know, I mean, I'm a registered Republican, but the position of district attorney has absolutely nothing to do with that. I've been doing this for 28 years. I don't know what party any of my victims are unless they were attacked in the Democratic House or the Republican House, or any perpetrators. This job is not political, and unfortunately, my opponent and others want to make it political. Why? Because this is the only thing they have, you know, is to turn this political. Because there's no qualifications, there's no track record of accomplishment. So the best thing you can do is attack your opponent. And how do you attack it? Is every time something happens in the White House, you say that your opponent had something to do with it. I mean, it's madness, really.
It is interesting, though, to think of just describing you by your political party is an attack.
You're going to need to look at some of the YouTubes to see what
Well,
I mean.
No, I mean, I believe that there.
I'm going to say no.
No, I believe that there are attacks that go beyond that. But the reaction that you had with Scott, I mean, he really just said she's a Republican.
Okay, my reaction is because with Scott, which I think we cleared.
Yeah, I know.
This is how grown-ups talk.
No, I found it very.
I just think
enriching.
think it's interesting that simply saying here's a Republican at this thing.
So I felt very personal about the march. I had my 24-year-old daughter with me, and her classmates, and I had my women prosecutors that mentor and help kids at risk and take their Tuesday to go help girls, in schools that where the girls are feeling bullied or other things. I had a team, and I had a reason for being there, and my reason was not political. My reason was this was the Me Too generation march, and I was the one who pioneered the sex crimes and human trafficking division back in the early 2000s, and had been fighting for the right of protecting girls and women from this kind of sexual abuse. When I created the unit, the Me Too movement hadn't happened, and people asked, why do we need a unit? It's because everybody's willing to report stranger rapes, but they're not willing to report what really is happening and that we're seeing now, which is all of the infringements and all of the exploitation that happens by people that you're supposed to be working with, that are supposed to respect you. What's a woman supposed to do? Oh, you can touch my body parts because I want to keep my job. Well, I've talked to victims like that, that our janitors are working in restaurants and they're being felt up and abused and cornered near refrigerators. That's why I was there. I was there to highlight that the work that I had started years ago and to make my daughter proud of me, because I actually don't like marches. But I wanted her to be proud of me. She asked me to be there, and I was there for a completely not political. That was it wasn't, he could have said, you're a D and you're there. Why are you there? It's more that I was reacting to being sick and tired of everything being turned political when my whole life has been not about politics, but about public safety, which is everyone's issue. Everyone wants to send their kids to school and not have the school shut down or be terrified because of a school threat.
So what you're saying is that the label Republican may be applicable to you, but it's like number 10 on the list of things that you were thinking about that day.
Absolutely.
That's fair. So I guess I do think you are part of a party. You are part of a leadership structure and a political leader. What do you think of the president? Do you support President Trump?
I'm a patriot, so I support that our country. I support the structure of our country, and I always pray for our leaders. I pray that the president and everybody there makes good decisions that aren't based on ego or on anything but what's good for our citizens. So that's what I hope for.
That doesn't sound like a yes.
I just don't think it's appropriate for me to talk about my personal feelings. I support our country. I love our country. It's, my grandmother was a survivor of genocide, and this country is incredible, and I want this country of immigrants and everybody to thrive. And I think it's really important that leaders make good decisions for our community and our country. I think that words matter, and I choose my words very carefully so that they don't hurt anybody unnecessarily. And I want to see communication. I want to see that at every level.
All right, last question. Thank you. After the last time you came on, I had a lot of people, and they still come up to me and ask me where your accent is from. Can you tell us about your background and what kind of tweaks your speech a little bit on that? I mean, you're obviously very eloquent.
Well, I'm Greek and Armenian by heritage, and my grandmother spoke to me in French. My mom was a working mom, so I have a lot of stuff in there. I spent a lot of years traveling. My mom was a lawyer, an international lawyer with Loughlin Oil and Drilling, so I spent a lot of my early years everywhere. I don't know. I think I don't know. I don't hear it, but I guess it's there somehow.
No, thank you. Summer Stephan, interim DA, thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Voices San Diego podcasts. This show is part of the Voices San Diego podcast network. Visit voiceofsan diego.org/podcast. There you'll learn more about our award-winning arts and education podcast, CultureCast and Good Schools for All, the Cura Chaos podcast about movers and shakers on both sides of the border, Beer Talk Radio, our business show, I Made It in San Diego, our sports show, The Kept Faith, and the rest of the shows in the network. Voices San Diego is a nonprofit. The majority of our budget comes from grants and donations from readers and listeners like you. If you like the show, please take a minute to go to voicessandiego.org and click the donate button. Or if you have a business and would like to sponsor the show, contact development@voicessandiego.org or call 619-550-5664.